Welcome to the Deep Dive. Today, we're going deep into the life of James Whitey Bulger.
Yeah.
Mob boss, FBI informant, fugitive. I mean, talk about a resume, right?
Seriously.
You guys sent us a ton of material on him.
Yeah.
And honestly, it's a lot to process.
It's wild.
Was he a ruthless criminal mastermind or some kind of misunderstood Robin Hood? Or was he just a straight-up villain?
Yeah, that's the question, isn't it? Like,
Yeah.
how do we make sense of this guy?
That's our mission today.
Yeah.
To cut through the hype
I
and get to the truth. Was Whitey a visionary or just a con artist? Let's dive in.
think it all starts with where he came from.
Okay.
You know, South Boston in the mid-20th century, this wasn't just any neighborhood.
Okay.
It was like this pressure cooker of poverty and loyalty and this deep distrust of authority, you know?
Okay.
Like, they had their own code, their own rules.
So how did that environment then mold young Whitey Bulger?
Right.
You mentioned his first arrest was at 14.
Yeah.
That's a...
Not exactly a typical childhood.
Yeah. No, not at all.
By 1956, he was already doing time in federal prison.
Yeah.
Even a stint in Alcatraz.
Oh, wow.
And that wasn't just punishment back then, you know? It was like earning your stripes.
Right.
Think about it. In that world, surviving Alcatraz gave you street cred,
Yeah.
like a mark of respect.
Yeah.
He learned the rules of the game there, you know? Made connections and came out even more anti-establishment.
So prison was almost like a twisted networking opportunity.
Yeah, in a way, yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, he comes out and he quickly rises through the ranks of Boston's Irish mob,
Okay.
the Winter Hill Gang.
The Winter Hill Gang. Okay.
But here's where it gets interesting. Bulger wasn't just a thug, right?
Yeah.
He was strategic, he was calculating.
Right.
The gang war with the Mullen Gang in the 70s,
Okay.
that's a prime example. He didn't just want to win, he wanted to dismantle his rivals.
Wow.
And he did it with ruthless efficiency.
Yeah. And the murder of Donald McGonigal.
Right.
It seems almost casual how brutal it was.
Yeah. I mean, Bulger just called out his name in broad daylight and shot him.
Wow.
It sent a message, you know?
Yeah.
Cross Bulger, and that's it.
You're done.
You're done. He understood the power of fear,
Yeah.
how to use it to maintain control. And you know, that calculated violence,
Right.
that's a key piece of the puzzle when we try to figure out, like, was he a visionary or just brutal?
So he's already a powerful gangster at this point.
Yeah.
But then in 1975, he makes a move that really throws everything into question.
Right.
He becomes an FBI informant.
It's the devil's bargain, isn't it?
Yeah.
Trading information about the Italian mafia, his rivals at the time, in exchange for protection.
Wow.
And his handler, John Connolly, wasn't just any agent. This was a childhood friend
Wow.
from South Boston.
It's like something out of a movie, right?
It really is.
This tangled web of loyalty and ambition and corruption.
Totally.
It really blurs the line between
Huh.
cop and criminal. I mean, you shared that anecdote
Yeah.
about Connolly buying Bulger ice cream.
While discussing informant deals.
Yeah. I mean, come on.
It's almost absurd.
Yeah.
But that shows you how deep their relationship was.
Right.
Connolly wasn't just protecting him, he was promoting him.
Wow.
He even padded his informant file to make him seem more valuable to the FBI.
So the FBI was so focused on taking down the Italian mafia that they essentially empowered Bulger to build his own criminal empire.
It's a dark chapter in law enforcement history, no question.
Yeah.
And it really speaks to Bulger's cunning, you know?
Yeah.
His ability to manipulate people and systems to his advantage.
Wow.
It makes you wonder, you know?
Yeah.
Was he a visionary?
Yeah.
Or was he just a con artist playing everyone?
Right. It's almost like he was playing chess while everyone else was playing checkers, right?
Yeah.
So with the FBI seemingly in his pocket, what does Bulger do with all this power?
He consolidates his control over Boston's underworld. I mean, we're talking racketeering, extortion, drug trafficking. You name it, Bulger had a piece of it.
Wow.
And he enforced his rule with an iron fist.
The murders of Louis Latif and Brian Halloran are pretty chilling examples of that, right?
Absolutely. Latif was suspected of skimming profits.
Right.
And Halloran witnessed it. So Bulger saw them both as loose ends, threats to his empire.
Yeah.
And, you know, he eliminated them, no hesitation.
You noted in your research that it wasn't just about the money for Bulger, though.
Right.
He seemed to have a code, like a twisted sense of loyalty.
He did. I mean, there are stories of him helping people in South Boston, you know,
Okay. Yeah.
giving money to families, protecting businesses from other criminals.
Right.
It's this whole Robin Hood image that really complicates his legacy.
It's almost like he wanted to be seen as this benevolent dictator,
Yeah. Yeah.
ruling his little fiefdom with a mix of fear and favor.
Yeah, and that's part of what makes him so fascinating, right?
Yeah.
He was this master manipulator,
Yeah.
able to cultivate this image of himself as a man of the people, even as he was ruthlessly eliminating anyone who threatened his power.
But even the most carefully constructed empires crumble eventually.
Yeah.
What brought Bulger's reign to an end?
Well, in 1994, a perfect storm was brewing, right?
Right. Yeah.
The FBI was facing all the scrutiny over its relationship with Bulger,
Right.
and there's this new team of agents who were determined to take him down.
Yeah.
They started putting the pressure on, and someone tipped him off about an impending indictment.
And then he vanishes.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
Just like that. Leaving behind his life in Boston
Yeah.
to become one of the FBI's 10 most wanted fugitives.
I mean, the reward for his capture was higher than bin Laden's at the time for a domestic fugitive.
Wow.
It was a massive embarrassment for the FBI.
Yeah.
Like a public relations nightmare
Oh, yeah.
that exposed the whole underbelly of their operations.
You mentioned in your notes that Bulger was on the run for an incredible 16 years.
Yeah.
What do we know about his life during that time?
He was incredibly disciplined, resourceful. I mean, he and Catherine Gregg, his girlfriend,
Right.
they moved from city to city,
Wow.
living under assumed names, always staying one step ahead of the authorities.
It sounds like he was almost relishing the chase,
Yeah. Yeah.
using all the skills he'd honed over the years to outwit the people who were hunting him.
There's definitely a sense of that. He wasn't just hiding.
Right.
He was living, traveling. He even went to Alcatraz as a tourist.
Wow.
It speaks to a certain, audacity.
Yeah, wow.
A refusal to just disappear.
So after 16 years of living in the shadows, how does Whitey Bulger finally get caught?
It was a combination of luck and good old-fashioned detective work.
Yeah.
In 2011, there was a tip that came in from a woman in Iceland.
Iceland.
Yeah.
Wow.
Who recognized Bulger and Gregg from news reports.
Iceland. That's a long way from South Boston.
It is. They were living quietly in Santa Monica, California,
Okay.
blending in.
Wow.
But the FBI finally had their man. They raided his apartment, found over $800,000 in cash, dozens of firearms,
Wow.
a collection of fake IDs.
It's like he was ready to run again at a moment's notice.
Absolutely. I mean, the capture was a huge victory for the FBI,
Yeah.
a chance to finally close the book on this dark chapter.
Right.
But it also marked the beginning of a new chapter,
Yeah.
one that would bring Bulger's story back into the spotlight
Right.
and force a reckoning with his legacy.
And that reckoning takes place in a courtroom in Boston, right?
Right. Bulger was extradited back to face a whole list of charges: racketeering, extortion, money laundering, and most significantly, involvement in 19 murders.
Wow.
This wasn't just about putting a gangster behind bars.
Right.
It was about holding him accountable for decades of violence and corruption.
So what was the atmosphere like during the trial?
Oh, it was electric.
Yeah.
I mean, this was a man who had loomed large in Boston's imagination for years.
Right.
The courtroom was packed.
Yeah.
Journalists, victims' families, even curious onlookers. Everyone wanted to witness a piece of history.
I imagine the testimonies must have been intense.
Oh, they were.
Yeah.
Especially from Bulger's former associates.
Right, right.
John Martirano, a hitman who had confessed to 20 murders himself,
Yeah.
was a key witness for the prosecution.
Wow.
And his testimony was chilling, detailing the inner workings of Bulger's enterprise,
Yeah.
really painting this picture of his ruthlessness.
Right.
But what was even more striking was the sense of betrayal he expressed.
In what way?
Martirano had considered Bulger a friend,
Look.
a mentor even,
Wow.
to learn that the man he had trusted,
Yeah.
had been an FBI informant all along. It was
Right.
devastating. He said, "It broke my heart."
Wow.
And it really encapsulated the depth of the betrayal felt by many who had been close to Bulger.
It really humanizes the impact of Bulger's actions.
Yeah.
Showing how they rippled outward, affecting not just his victims, but those who were loyal to him. It adds another layer to the question of, was he a visionary or a con man?
Right.
It's almost Shakespearean, isn't it?
Yeah.
This tragic downfall, the betrayals, the violence.
It really is.
So how did the trial end? Did justice prevail?
It did, at least in the eyes of the law. At the age of 83, Bulger was found guilty on 31 counts,
Wow.
including complicity in 19 murders. He was sentenced to 2 consecutive life terms plus 5 years,
Wow.
effectively a death sentence.
So after decades of evading justice, Whitey Bulger finally gets his comeuppance.
It seemed that way, but even in his final chapter, the controversy surrounding him wouldn't end.
You mentioned that even Bulger's final chapter was shrouded in controversy.
Yeah.
What happened?
Well, in 2018, Bulger was transferred to USP Hazleton in West Virginia,
Okay.
a prison known for its volatile mix of inmates.
Right.
Within hours of his arrival, he was brutally beaten to death.
Killed within hours.
Yeah,
That sounds incredibly suspicious.
it was.
Almost like a targeted hit.
Exactly. The circumstances surrounding his death were incredibly murky.
Right.
He was a high-profile inmate with a long list of enemies.
Yeah.
And they put him in the general population, not protective custody.
So was it just a case of the prison system failing to protect a vulnerable inmate, or was there something more sinister at play?
That's the question that has fueled countless conspiracy theories.
Right.
Bulger's family filed a wrongful death lawsuit alleging that prison officials deliberately put him at risk.
Okay.
They argued that his transfer to Hazleton and the lack of proper security measures was basically a death sentence.
What was the outcome of the lawsuit?
It was ultimately dismissed. The court ruled that while there were certainly lapses in security, there wasn't enough evidence to prove that Bulger's death was intentional.
So even in death, Whitey Bulger continues to generate controversy.
Right.
It's almost as if his story is designed to keep us guessing,
Yeah,
to blur the lines between truth and myth.
absolutely. And maybe that's part of his enduring fascination. He was a master manipulator in life, and even in death, he continues to hold us in his thrall.
Now, before we wrap up, there's one piece of the puzzle we haven't explored yet. Bulger's relationship with his brother, William Billy Bulger.
Right.
He was a powerful politician.
Yeah,
A stark contrast to Whitey's life of crime.
totally.
How did these two vastly different paths intersect?
It's a fascinating dynamic. It adds another layer of complexity to Bulger's story.
Right.
Here we have two brothers, raised in the same environment,
Yeah.
yet their lives take radically different trajectories.
Right.
One embraces the world of crime, the other the world of politics.
Right.
And yet, despite their differences, they remain connected throughout their lives.
You mentioned that they visited their mother together,
Hmm.
and maintained a sense of family loyalty.
Yeah.
But how much did William know about Whitey's criminal activities?
Right.
Did he willfully turn a blind eye?
Yeah.
Or was he genuinely in the dark?
That's a question that has haunted William Bulger for years.
Yeah.
He has always maintained that he had no knowledge of his brother's crimes,
Okay.
that Whitey kept him at arm's length when it came to his business.
But there are some pretty compelling pieces of evidence that suggest otherwise, aren't there?
There are.
Like that phone call William received from Whitey just weeks before he disappeared.
Yeah, that phone call became a major point of contention.
Right.
At the time, William was the president of the Massachusetts State Senate, a position of immense power.
Right.
And when he was called to testify before a congressional committee investigating the FBI's handling of Whitey Bulger, he invoked his Fifth Amendment right against self-incrimination when asked about the content of that call.
So he refused to answer questions about a conversation with his fugitive brother,
Yeah,
who was wanted for racketeering and murder.
right.
I mean, it's hard to believe that didn't raise some eyebrows.
It certainly did. And
Yeah.
it fueled public speculation that William knew more than he was letting on. The controversy surrounding the Bulger brothers ultimately tarnished William's reputation and cost him his presidency at UMass.
It's a tragic reminder of how the sins of one family member can have a ripple effect,
Yeah.
impacting even those who have led seemingly upstanding lives.
Yeah.
It also speaks to the enduring power of family loyalty.
Right.
How it can cloud judgment and blur the lines between right and wrong.
Absolutely. And it adds yet another layer to the question we've been grappling with throughout this deep dive. Was Whitey Bulger a visionary or a con man?
It's a question that doesn't have an easy answer.
Yeah.
He was undeniably a brilliant criminal,
Yeah.
a master manipulator who built a criminal empire
Right.
and evaded justice for years.
Yeah.
He was also a ruthless killer, responsible for the deaths of at least 19 people.
Right.
And yet, he cultivated this image of himself as a Robin Hood figure,
Yeah.
a protector of the Irish community in South Boston.
Right.
Some people genuinely believed he was looking out for them, even as he was enriching himself through illegal activities and eliminating his rivals with cold-blooded efficiency.
It's wild.
So what do we make of this complicated, contradictory figure?
Yeah.
Was he a product of his environment?
Right.
A man who rose to power in a world where loyalty and brutality were intertwined?
Yeah.
Or was he simply a sociopath who exploited those around him for his own gain?
I think it's a combination of both. He was a product of his time and place.
Yeah.
But he also made choices that led him down a dark path. He was capable of both great charisma and great cruelty. And ultimately, it's up to each of us to decide where we fall on the spectrum of judgment.
This deep dive has certainly given us a lot to think about. Whitey Bulger's story is a cautionary tale,
It is.
a reminder that power unchecked and corrupted can have devastating consequences.
Yeah.
It also forces us to confront the complexities of human nature
Right.
and the difficulty of separating truth from myth.
Absolutely. And maybe that's the most important takeaway from this deep dive. There are no easy answers when it comes to figures like Whitey Bulger. His story challenges us to think critically, to question our assumptions, and to recognize that the line between good and evil is often much blurrier than we'd like to believe.
Well said. This has been a fascinating, if unsettling, exploration of a man who continues to captivate and confound us. And as always, we leave it to you, our listeners, to draw your own conclusions. Until next time, keep diving.